So Jim, you're on the line.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Lee. I appreciate this forum to be able to ask questions, and I also really appreciate your service. My question is just, as a citizen, I continue to hear some of the things like you'd mentioned relative to the millions of dollars that were spent on a couple of facilities that were really unusable. It seems like I've heard that Senator Reid from Nevada has money coming to his state to support cowboy poetry and just different things like that, that there's dollars being spent throughout the United States in the budget that are just unnecessary. And it seems like as a citizen, it's just hard for us to have any kind of an impact. So I guess my question is, what can we do? How can we help you and others that are trying to get a rein on these things and try to rein these budgets in? Is there anything that we can do to help in that?
Yeah, yes, certainly, and I think the best thing you can do, Jim, is to make sure that you keep a constant watchful eye on what the federal government's doing, and always ask the question, what gives you this authority? Well, why is it that the federal government is even involved in funding cowboy poetry festivals, whether in Nevada, because that's Harry Reid's state, or elsewhere for any reason? You don't want the federal government spending casually in areas like that, because it's not the federal government's job. It's not what it was set up to do. One of the things that has come to frustrate me about Washington is the fact that sometimes in Congress you feel a little bit like you would feel if you moved out into the country and you had access to only one grocery store. And you went to that grocery store and your wife called you on your way home from work and said, I need you to pick up bread, milk, and eggs, just the basics, nothing more. So you went to the store and you bought bread, milk, and eggs, and you put them on the cashier's counter, and the cashier told you, sorry, this is a different kind of store. You can't buy just bread, milk, and eggs, at least not unless you also buy a half-ton of iron ore, a bucket of nails, a book about cowboy poetry, and a Barry Manilow album. And you'd say, well, you know, I don't want any of those other things, and they'd say, too bad. You get all of that or none of it. That's very often what we're told when we go to vote here in Washington. They lump together all of these disparate components of a piece of legislation. And everybody is told, if you want anything that's in here, you have to vote for everything that's in here. This all stems from the fact that people in Washington suffer from a syndrome of self-importance. They think everything revolves around them, and that's a big problem. We also have to remember that the opposite of bad government is not good government. It's not even necessarily just limited government, though limited government is part of it. It's the kind of society in which we take care of ourselves, we take care of each other. We have a free market economy and we have strong institutions of civil society. That's what we need to build toward. But we can't ever get there until we have a more limited government. To have a more limited government, we have to start voting differently. We have to vote in people who don't promise everything, don't promise the sun, the moon, and the stars, but they promise instead just to take care of the basic operations of government, those basic operations of government that are assigned to Washington, D.C. Now, that's what we do in Utah. That's how we live in Utah. I call it the Utah model. We look out for a well-regulated society, and to do that, we don't look to government. We look to ourselves, to each other, to our institutions of civil society, to our religious and voluntary associations, and we allow the free market to operate within that construct. That's really how we get there. That's really how we get to the place where you're talking about, where we stop engaging in wasteful spending. People in Washington like to talk about balancing the budget by just eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, and we certainly need to do that. But you have to remember that if you analogize those to crumbs that fall from the table, those crumbs are bigger if the pie is enormous than they would be if the pie were smaller. We've got to shrink the pie of government because it's too big right now, and that's why too many big crumbs are falling from the table.